Starting, all attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, this is Donnie at the Green Sports Alliance. My apologies that we're starting a little late. We were just experiencing some technical difficulties. Really appreciate your patience. So we are happy to welcome all of you to this month's webinar, Peak Performers, How Snow Sports Are Going Green. Alliance members, please remember that you'll be able to access a recording of today's webinar, as well as past webinars in our member archives. And we're happy to share the slides from today with any attendees. Please be sure to email me at dania@greensportsalliance.org for more information. That's DANIA@greensportsalliance.org. Just a few announcements before we get going. We've got a lot going on here at the Green Sports Alliance. We just had a new report release called Taking the Field, Advancing Energy and Water Efficiency in Sports Venues. This was in partnership with the National Institute of Building Sciences. This report considers the potential water and energy reductions the U.S. sports sector could make and highlights the financial savings some leagues and teams are already seeing from putting such efficiency initiatives into place. To download, visit our partners' website at nibs.org/takingthefield. And our next webinar on March 15th will focus on this particular report. It'll provide an overview of this report and highlight case studies of sports venues that have implemented better practices in energy and water efficiency. So join us on March 15th at the same time, 10 a.m. Pacific and 1 p.m. Eastern. Finally, just a reminder that registration is open for the 2017 Summit. We're going to be in Sacramento at the new Golden One Center, and we're really excited for what we have in store. This year's theme is focusing on engaging fans, athletes, and communities, and we hope to see you there. Visit greensportssummit.org to learn more and to register. Again, if you have any questions about webinars or any of our programs or upcoming events, feel free to email me, Dania@greensportsalliance.org. So as a reminder, there will be time for Q&A with our panelists at the end of the webinar. Please type your questions in the chat box at any time during the webinar, and the panel will address as many as possible. And I will be sending out shortly a link for our LNS captioning for this webinar. We'd like to thank LNS Captioning for providing services for another one of our webinars. Just sent that link in the chat box, and you can feel free to follow along. Now, this month, we're really excited to feature snow sports. Ski and snow sports make up a multi-billion-dollar industry that engages with millions of guests and world-class athletes. And with the threat of climate change, the industry faces the unique challenge of preserving these fragile natural areas for future sport and recreational use. So last month, we announced a partnership with the ski and sports industry dedicated to addressing climate change, reducing carbon emissions, and preserving ski areas for the continued enjoyment of future generation. These partners included the National Ski Area Association, Protect Our Winners, and a representative from Protect Our Winners is on our webinar today, and 4 ski resorts who are the first to join the Green Sports Alliance as members. And these include Seven Springs Mountain Resort, Hidden Valley Resort, Laurel Mountain Ski Resort, and Timberline Lodge and Ski Area. And Gina will be talking to us about Timberline in a bit. We're excited to partner with this industry to find solutions that enhance their operations and engage the community towards positive environmental change. So I'll get us started, and I'll introduce our speakers. We're really excited to have some of our partners on here. So first up, we're going to have Chris Steinkamp, who is the Executive Director of Protect Our Winners based in Boulder, Colorado. Leading Protect Our Winners since its inception in 2007, Chris has overseen the organization's strategic growth into a global climate advocacy organization representing the outdoor sports community. Prior to 2007, Chris spent 12 years in advertising and was the Director of Marketing for action sports content platform Teton Gravity Research and the Head of Partnerships and Strategy at Good Worldwide. Really excited to have you on, Chris. Next, we will have Gina Christiansen, Sustainability and Environmental Coordinator at Timberline Lodge and Ski Area. She began skiing at a young age and eventually turned her passion for environmental stewardship into a voice in the ski industry as an advocate for sustainability at Timberline Lodge and Ski Area. In 2016, Timberline expanded her responsibilities to include managing broader issues of sustainability throughout the company. Gina is working to expand programs promoting Timberline's environmental stewardship through reducing energy usage and waste production. She continues to work in partnership with the Forest Service to ensure that Timberline is implementing the best management practices to ensure ecological health and around the ski area and supporting facilities. Really excited you can join us, Gina. And finally, we have Joel Cesar. Sorry if I butchered that, Joel. Joel is a CEO of Stokeshare.com. He is a change agent, and like most mission-driven 30-somethings, he wears many hats. He's an entrepreneur, activist, public servant, teacher, and adrenaline junkie. He's a co-founder and CEO of Stokeshare, the world's marketplace for action sports gear, the Green Building Advisor for the City of Santa Monica's internationally recognized Office of Sustainability, co-chair of Surfrider Foundation Los Angeles, and an adjunct professor in Santa Monica College's Sustainable Technologies program. Excited to have Joel on as well. So to kick us off, we're going to have Chris Steinkamp from Protect Our Winners to let you know about what Protect Our Winners is all about, as well as providing some context as to why we're talking about snow sports in the first place. So Chris, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Dania. I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for joining today, and thanks for the to the Green Sports Alliance for having me and all of us on here this afternoon. Please feel free to ask any questions after I'm finished. But I just kind of wanted to give you all just a quick overview of kind of who we are and what we're doing in the most relevant way for what for your business. So let's take it to the next slide. So as you all know, this is kind of what we're dealing with. Inconsistent winters are pretty common now. Next slide. And what we thought of as a normal winter, maybe a decade ago, has become very abnormal and very inconsistent. And so, while we're having an amazing winter in most parts of the United States this year, we have to remind ourselves that this was Squaw Valley just about 2 years ago. So, we're in an age now, as all of you know who are in the climate change business, is that, normal winters are a thing of the past. And we've got to try to find a way to get back to that consistency, not necessarily for our powder days, but for our industry and our communities, for the vibrancy of our communities. So, when you look at these photographs, this is kind of what we're dealing with. So with the good comes the bad. And as you all know, what the science tells us is that this is going to be the long-term trend for the foreseeable future. Okay, next. So again, this is the SA trade show last month in Denver. And, while some of you, may believe that, Protect Our Winners and, all of us in snow sports are doing this because we're trying to save our powder days, that's a very small part of the issue. What we're doing here is we're trying to address climate change and mobilize the global, winter sports community because we have a voice in this and we have a lot at stake. We're a $67 billion industry, and when it doesn't snow, it's an economic loss for all of us, not just in the industry, but in small towns and the rural communities that depend on snow. So when we started Protect Our Winners, we all love to ski and we all love to snowboard, but the underlying goal for all of us is to mobilize the community to protect our industry and to protect our jobs and the vibrancy and the future of our sport. So next slide, please. So, we are the leading voice on climate change for the outdoor sports community. We were started in 2007 by a person over named Jeremy Jones, who I'll get into in a second, who had seen how climate change was impacting the places that he travels and the places that he lives in Lake Tahoe year after year. It was visibly different year after year. And, I would say that the snow sports community was one of the first groups to really see climate change firsthand. And this was, 8 to 10 years ago, when nobody was really understanding what climate change was on a broad scale. But we were one of the first groups to actually see it because we spend so much time in the mountains. And the mountains are pretty much the canary in the coal mine in terms of climate change. They're the first visible changes that we're going to be seeing in terms of glaciers and snowpack in terms of climate change. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a social movement for positive climate action around the world. We see the global snow sports community in the U.S. anyway, is 30 million snowboarders and skiers every year. So we see that the opportunity for a social movement is huge. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to galvanize the voices of everyone who skis and snowboards, from people like you and I to the industry and to the resorts, to have one single voice on this issue. So next. So just very quickly, we're a global organization. Obviously, we're strongest in the United States because that's where we started. But we have about 130,000 supporters globally. You know, we have chapters in Canada, Europe, Australia. And we were founded again by Jeremy Jones, who lives in Lake Tahoe, back in 2007. Our social community is really where we live. You know, we speak to a very young, progressive group of skiers and snowboarders and winter sports enthusiasts. And, you know, we've got to figure out a way to reach them in the most relevant way that we possibly can. And so we're very concerned about or very aware of how we choose our media to connect with them, but also how we choose our messengers. And this is what I kind of want to talk to you quickly this morning. We work with about 80 pro athletes, and I think, you know, what we do at POW, this is the core of who we are. We're an athlete-driven organization. We work with our pro athletes because very early on we realized that these guys have the influence. These guys have the voice to mobilize a large, you know, millions of people, either on social media or through their media, more traditional media efforts. But, you know, we work with about 80 pro athletes, and I'll get into that in a second. But again, we see this as, you know, really one of the core pillars of who we are and what we do because of how effective we can be with the pro athlete voice. Okay, next. But just really quickly, this is, you know, we work with a lot of resorts, and, you know, we understand that a lot of resorts that we work with do a lot of really good work on sustainability. They're minimizing their carbon footprint. They're doing a lot of work in operational greening, which is desperately needed. So how can POW work with resorts in a way that is additive and is more valuable to what they're already doing? And so when we work with a resort, we see the biggest lever that resorts have is your ability to, or their ability to reach a large amount of guests every year. You know, some resorts have, you know, hundreds of thousands of guests that come through, you know, their cities or their towns every year. And how can we create a platform for the resort to be almost a climate center for, or an environmental center for all of these guests that come from faraway places, so that after they leave the resort, they are a little bit smart about climate change so that they can take it home with them. So we work with our resorts maybe in a little bit a different way than other organizations, but we see activating guests and activating the voice of climate at the resort as one of the most valuable things we can do. So, for example, we work with Aspen very closely, and, you know, when we work with them, we kind of take this mantra as like, how can we touch each and every guest that come through your gondola plaza with a message of climate action? And so they're wearing our logo on all of their staff jackets, and it's not necessarily a promotional vehicle for them or for us, although it is kind of. It's more about a reminder that what Aspen stands for and for guests to ask a question. So, for example, if they're on the lift line or if they're in a gondola with a ski patrolman and they see the POW patch, they might say, hey, what does that stand for? Or what does Aspen stand for in regards to climate change? And all of their staff are trained on, you know, on the basics of climate change science and what Aspen's doing. So that a discussion takes place. And if we can just have hundreds or maybe even thousands of small discussions on the mountain throughout the season, then we've effectively created a movement. And that's what we want to do with resorts. Next. Again, so, you know, we're doing, you know, our goal is to create a social movement. And we talked to a very young, progressive group of skiers and snowboarders. And, you know, these guys have very deep values, especially, you know, in the last few years, we realized that young people are very progressive and they wear their values on their shoulder. And so when we work with a resort, we want to make sure that we tell that story to our audience, because we want to build that emotional connection between the resort and our community, so that they know which resorts stand for climate action and share their values. And so another goal of ours is to create that emotional connection between our resort partners and the community as a whole. Because again, you know, the progressive young skiers and snowboarders out there want to make sure that the brands that they choose to partner with share their values. Next. And this is just very quickly how we work with Squaw Valley, for example. They've set up a carpool area in their resort. Again, it's a great thing for people to carpool, and it's doing a really fantastic job in terms of reducing carbon emissions around the Tahoe region. But again, it's a reminder that climate change is real. It's a reminder what the resort stands for, and it's a reminder that guests, when they come to Squaw Valley, should be a little bit smarter about climate change when they leave. And that's our goal. And we do this in a lot of creative different ways. We work with resorts in many different ways to articulate that. So it might be a patch on a jacket. It might be a carpool area, but it also could be a sticker on recycling bins. We just want to do it in the most creative way that we can and in a way that makes sense for a resort in terms of bandwidth and cost. But again, just very quickly, I want to just dive back into the how we work with our athletes. And again, these athletes are the core of what we do, and we spend a lot of time every day trying to figure out a way to give them the platform to speak out. Just to kind of strengthen that, like POW and what we call it our POW Riders Alliance, and it's 80 pro athletes who have joined us because they saw exactly, or they're seeing exactly what Jeremy saw 10 years ago, and they want a platform to speak out. So many of them are traveling around the world, and many of them, don't have a lot of time to do it. So our promise to them is that we're going to give them opportunities to do it in a way that fits their schedule, but that is most effective. So here is Kit Delorier, who is a mountain climber, professional skier from Jackson Hole, speaking to a class of students. And we have a program that we work with the North Face on and Cliff Bar that takes pro athletes into schools to talk to kids about climate change. Because if we can change the way that the next generation feels about climate change and how they're interacting and how they're helping to be part of the solution, then we've gotten a leg up on this. So in the last 6 years, we visited about 65,000 students with pro athletes. And it's really powerful. As you can imagine, when students are hearing about climate change from their science teacher or their parents, they probably don't really understand it as well. But when a pro athlete comes in, Olympian like Gretchen Bleiler or Chris Davenport or Kit Delorier comes in and says, this is what I'm seeing firsthand, and this is what I want you to do, it's really powerful, and it resonates with these young kids, and they leave super inspired, and they want to take action. So we go into schools with athletes, we go into resorts, we go into small towns, wherever we can get an audience of young kids, we bring an athlete to. And it's a big thing, it's a big part of what we do with pro athletes. Next. Back during the Sochi Olympics about 3 years ago, we worked with Yale University on a program that, we realized that, we wanted to elevate climate change on the biggest stage in sports, and there's nothing bigger than the Olympics, obviously. So when we went to, during the Sochi Olympics, we worked with about 20 athletes, and we gave them opportunities to speak out, whether it was from Sochi or after they got home. We wanted to make sure that climate change was one of the topics that came out of Sochi. Obviously, the weather in Sochi was not what it should have been. It was kind of a strange place to be choosing an Olympics to begin with, but it was the perfect venue to be talking about climate change because it was top of mind to most people. So we worked with Yale University, and we worked with about 20 top-tier athletes to give them a platform to speak out. And a lot of it was in the media, op-eds. Next slide. So it was a lot of op-eds, a lot of articles in magazines and newspapers, and a lot of articles came out referencing what we were doing. So at the end of the day, at the end of the Olympic Games, we had about 314 million impressions through traditional media. And it was just kind of a wake-up call to all of us saying, like, look, these athletes have a really incredible voice. And if we can give them the platform to speak out and set up these opportunities for them, then they've got this voice that is so unique in the climate fight right now. That it's incredibly powerful. So we're dedicated to doing this. We're going to be doing it again in the South Korean Olympics next year, about a year from now, to try to even do better than 314 million. But this is just one example of how we're activating athletes. Okay, next.
Chris, this is Dania. Just a reminder, you have about 3 minutes.
Okay, great. I will speed it up. Again, so this is at X Games. Last year, we did it about 2 weeks ago, a POW sticker during primetime TV. Again, a reminder of climate action. Next. MSNBC, Alex Diebold, this is part of our Yale University effort. We got him on MSNBC when he got back from Sochi just to talk about climate change on the Chris Hayes show. Here was an interesting effort that we worked with on the White House. This is Caroline Gleich talking about on Instagram. She has an incredibly huge following on Instagram. So she obviously wanted to talk about the air pollution in Salt Lake City. And so she talked about it on Instagram, and it reached a ton of people. Okay, next. We worked with the White House on this effort. When the hashtag Act on Climate was launched about 4 years ago, they came to us and they said, hey, look, can you activate your athletes and give them an opportunity to visually articulate what's at stake? So we put it out to our athletes, and most every one of them did. And they took to Instagram, they posted pictures from wherever they were, and they tagged it Act on Climate. And within the first week, we had 10 million impressions of the hashtag, and it really elevated the issue of climate change on social media, which obviously reaches a very young progressive audience, and Act on Climate became a hashtag that people just started to use. And it was exactly what we wanted. Okay, go ahead. We brought the EPA Administrator, Gina McCarthy, to the X Games. This was an opportunity for us to connect action sports with some of the good work that was coming out of the X Games, it was coming out of the EPA. So next slide. So here is Gina McCarthy at the X Games last year with Gretchen Bleiler. And again, this was just an opportunity for us to connect with pro athletes so that they could learn more about what the EPA was doing, what the good work that was being done, that was coming out of Washington, and that they could then take to social media and communicate it to the larger young snowboard audience. And it was a really good move on both of our parts to do this. Okay, next. I don't know if you guys know who Alex Honnold is, but he's a pro climber. But Alex Honnold took the Act on Climate hashtag up to the face of El Capitan. And this was part of our campaign with the White House. And this is just a quote that they sent us. But it said, I wanted to tell you that we've been completely blown away by what we brought to life. The photos from the athletes are inspiring people, everyday people, in a way that only they could, and driving a much larger audience to identify with the cause of climate change. And no one could ever manufacture the kind of content that we're creating, and they're reaching people in a really important and relevant way. So that was just a really good validating statement from the White House to say that, climate change is an issue that a lot of people aren't getting, or they're getting misinformation on it. But if we can bring a unique voice to the discussion, that's what we're going to do. And I think athletes are doing that. So why don't I end here? This is just some press that's come out recently on our efforts with the athletes. And I guess that's it. Thanks very much, and I'll be around to answer questions after the other two presentations. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, for that perspective. And now we're going to change gears a little and bring on Gina from Timberline and talk about, we talked about the community side, why snow sports is involved in this. Now we're going to see what ski lodges in this industry are doing to address these issues. I'll let you take it away. Gina, go ahead.
Hello. Hi, everyone, for joining today. I'm just going to talk about some of the programs some of the things that we face at Timberline and at the resort level, and I'm going to outline programs that we have in place and other programs that we are going to try to move towards in the future. So a little bit of background about Timberline. We are in Northwest Oregon. We're on Mount Hood, which is the highest volcano in Oregon. We operate as a concessionaire under a Forest Service permit, and the same family has held that permit since 1955. A concessionaire means that we handle all of the ski operations and hotel, lodge, food operations within the Forest Service, on Forest Service land and within the Forest Service building. So we don't own the buildings that we operate in, which presents special challenges that I'll touch on later for us as far as energy conservation, water use, things of that nature. So you can see a little bit of stats here. We have 7 lifts. We cover 1,415 acres. We are the only ski area in the U.S. that offers year-round skiing. We typically make it until September, October every year. Some years, though, more recently, we have had to begin closing early in August, early September because of lack of snowfall. And that's something that is newer for us to have to handle. We typically have enough snow to go. In the past, we've had enough snow to go well into September, end of September. But more recent years have left us thin with summer operations. We have 7 food venues on and off site. We have a brew pub. We have several opportunities for our guests to have high-end dining all the way down to just regular hamburger and fries. We also operate the hotel in the historic lodge with 70 rooms. And between skier visits, overnight stays, and just day visits, we see over 2 million people at Timberline on an annual basis. Next slide. So these are a few of the programs that I'm working on as far as tracking, because one of my goals as a sustainability coordinator is to track our usage, track our energy usage, our water usage, and our waste, and set long-term reduction goals for the company. So with energy use, I'm doing that through NSA's Climate Challenge, and that is a forum that allows us to track exactly what we're using as far as energy, and that's in terms of carbon output, and so tons of carbon generated by our operations. And that also gives me an idea of where we can go in the future in trying to reduce that number. We also track our water use very carefully. We operate with springs that are within our ski area, and so we're spring fed. We have an on-site water sewage treatment plant and a leach field so we handle all of our wastewater on-site. As far as water quality goes, we continually test for conductivity, which is a measure of salt because you do have to salt the snow to maintain the correct snow quality in the summertime. And we continually test for that. We also test for turbidity, which is a measure of erosion coming out of the ski area. And that both of those things affect Lower Columbia River steelhead, which we influence critical habitat in our ski area. And as far as waste, recycling, and compost, we compost out of our kitchen. We're working on expanding that program right now. We're also working on continually expanding our recycling and reducing our waste. So next slide. So being a ski area, we do face some unique challenges to other sports venues. One of the biggest ones is our remoteness. We're 60 miles from the Portland airport, but we are in the farthest corner of our county possible, which creates some issues with waste hauling, recycling, deliveries, etc. Also weather comes into play with that. If you look at historic snowfall data, we average about 400 inches of snowfall a year with a base depth of 150 inches on average. Now that number is gradually decreasing over the last 10 years. This year we're having a big winter, but the previous 3 years have been quite thin. So the weather up here causes some challenges as far as our capability of reducing waste and making changes in our recycling programs. The traffic up here, if anyone's ever been to a ski area, you know that traffic is always a pain, especially on weekends. We are beginning to have a rideshare and carpooling forum to encourage people to not bring their vehicles up here. We are also trying to expand shuttle services. The public area transit in the area does run buses up here, so we see several loads of bus traffic coming up, and all that goes into helping reduce the total carbon output of our operation and getting people up here to be able to enjoy the environment while not making a huge impact with their vehicle. As far as permitting, we have to work in partnership with the U.S. Forest Service and the National Marine Fisheries Service. We also work with the State Historic Preservation Office because the building is a nationally historic building, and that our day lodge is also Forest Service owned building. So any upgrades that we make, any changes in operations we make, any ground disturbing things that we do up here, we have to go through all of those regulatory agencies, which creates for some interesting interactions. As far as the watershed ecosystem, we influence the headwaters of 3 major watersheds that flow into critical steelhead habitat, and that those populations are listed as threatened. And so we have to be very careful with our operations on the ground, how we handle stormwater runoff, what goes into our runoff as far as any hazardous spills, fuel spills, and just basic erosion that comes off of a volcano like this. And so, again, we work very closely with our partner agencies to make sure that we're being the best stewards possible to the land that we influence around us with our operations. Next slide. So I've listed here just a few of the things that we're doing with our ski and ride operations to address our actual input, our carbon use, and our influence on the guests. So we're in the process of purchasing some new piston bully snowcats that help us track and monitor our fuel consumption and give us an idea of how much we're using and where we can most effectively use those snowcats while using the least amount of fuel possible. We have a couple of these Ultra-Tech magnetic induction lights currently, and we're working on getting more units. These are fantastic for reducing power energy use and also reducing waste, because they have such a long life that you barely need to replace them. They also don't contain mercury, so when you do have to replace them, you're not adding to additional pollution problems. And I've included a link here if anyone's interested. The lights that we use in the snow industry are called Snow Bright. There's also lights for gymnasiums and other sports venues that this company makes. And it's a magnetic induction light, so it's not an LED. It's not your traditional halide lighting. So this is a really cool product that we're working on expanding within our ski area. We also have an on-hill recycling program for guests to reduce litter. We also are just about to kick off a big guest education program to encourage guests to recycle and to reduce their waste production up here so that we can, again, be good stewards to the hill that we are responsible for. And so I already touched on the Mount Hood Express shuttle. That's the shuttle that comes up here that runs winter and summer. There's many buses that come up here every day. The bus is great because it has ski racks on it. It also, in the summertime, they tow a trailer with bike racks, and so people can ride a bus up here, bring their mountain bike, and ride down the hill. And you can get, many, many miles in that way just by taking advantage of the shuttle that comes up here and not have to be using your car to recreate. We have some paperless programs, and we are also working on expanding that. We've gone totally paperless with our incident reporting this year and our rental releases, which is great. I'm pushing more and more for all paperwork resort-wide to be totally paperless. So that, again, reduces our footprint and reduces the amount of products that we're using and the amount of waste that we're generating. Next slide. So on top of the ski area, we also do run the lodge, and we have all of the food outlets, venues. We try to source as much local food as possible to minimize the shipping that we are causing with our operation. One program, it's kind of hard to read in this picture here, in the top picture, but that program is advertising or sharing with our guests our locally raised cattle program. And so all of the beef products that we use in all of our food venues comes from a herd of cattle that we purchased and that we're having locally raised by a farmer about 45 minutes from Timberline. All of that is pasture raised, grass-fed beef. It's butchered in-house. We try to use as much of the cow as possible. We make our own sausages and broths, etc., with those cows that we are raising. And so that's just one example of how we're trying to source food as locally as possible. We also provide our guests with water bottle fill stations. I already mentioned our composting out of the kitchens. Just last year, we remodeled one of our cafes, our kind of basic lunch cafe, to only have reusable flatware and plates. We no longer, if we do to go, it's just wrapped in thin paper. It's not in big boxes or anything. Within the historic lodge, we go out of our way to refurbish and restore as many textiles as possible, and that's also part of the historic preservation that we do up here. We also do this with wood furniture and other fixtures within the historic lodge, and that goes into us not having to purchase new items or look for new items. We very rarely discard of old textiles. We go out of our way to preserve all of those things so that we're not generating, again, we're just reusing as much as possible. And a new program that I am trying to get off the ground out of our lodge is a soap recycling program. And what this does is it takes old soap scraps from the rooms and we box them up in special containers, ship them to this nonprofit called Clean the World. And what they do is they melt that down into new bars of soap and then disperse those worldwide to villages that lack access to soap and sanitary practices. Now, those go out also with an education program to educate people on sanitary practices, proper hand washing. So it's not just sending the soap off, it's actually a whole education program to improve communities worldwide. Next slide. And so another part of my job on top of sustainability is I'm also the environmental coordinator for our operations. And so in the summertime, I am in charge of any restoration or revegetation that goes on around here. I've included these pictures just to show an example of one of the projects I completed in the last couple of years. There's this old dirt service road that you can see on top, and it was basically just a terrible erosion hazard affecting water quality coming from the ski area. And over the course of a summer, we decommissioned the entire road. And the picture below is, I believe, 2 years after the fact, after we finished that restoration. And as you can see, it's largely revegetated. You can hardly even tell where that old road was. So we do have a native seed bank up here at Timberline that we use for these types of restoration projects. We also do extensive road maintenance to, again, minimize our environmental footprint, our erosion footprint, and we're constantly identifying roads that we no longer need to try to decommission them and take them as closely back to the natural state as possible. And again, that goes in with stormwater management, water quality, the testing that we do up here to maintain the highest level of purity of the water that comes out of our ski area. So we're really going out of our way to minimize our actual ecological footprint as far as our operations go. And these last two are just a couple of other programs that we help with in the summertime, mostly with our summer operations. The Ant Farm is a local nonprofit that offers jobs and skills training to at-risk youth, and most of the participants in that program are kids who have come from broken families and come from kind of awful backgrounds, and we bring them up here and teach them how to do these restoration projects. I use them for trail maintenance as far as the hiking trails go, and they're just a fantastic group of kids that come up, and it's really helping them also connect with their natural environment and their local mountain and their local forest. And the 44 Trails Association is another nonprofit that we support through Timberline, and that is a local association to help build and maintain mountain bike trails within the area. So that is, we host volunteer days with them every year to go out. We try to get as many staff as possible involved in this, and so we're not just participating in the ski and snowboard industry, we're also supporting local mountain biking and other recreational opportunities on Mount Hood. And I believe that's it. I've added my contact information here if anybody's interested in following up, asking me more questions after this is over. Feel free to contact me anytime.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gina. And now we're going to move over to Joel from Stokeshare, who's going to talk about this cool entrepreneurial opportunity that works at the nexus of environment and outdoor sports, snow sports in particular. I'll let you take it away, Joel.
Thank you, Jania, and thank you everybody for joining the webinar, and really humbled to follow two speakers before me. Such incredible work, so really cool to be here. So yeah, my name is Joel Cesar. I'm the founder and CEO of Stokeshare.com, which is an online gear sharing marketplace I'll tell you lots about in a moment. But I wear a few hats at the moment as well in this idea of a broader sense of sustainability. In addition to building Stokeshare, I currently manage the Green Building Program for the City of Santa Monica. I'm the vice chair of the Surfrider Foundation in Los Angeles, and I teach in Santa Monica College's Sustainable Technologies Program. So my career has brought me to this point where I can work on complex environmental problems from a variety of angles, and I'm just incredibly passionate about the opportunities ahead. So we can stay on this slide. We envision Stokeshare as the world's marketplace for adventure. So Stokeshare is an online platform that allows users to rent each other action sports equipment. So think of it as Airbnb meets REI. We launched over 2 years ago and have seen incredible growth since. We have thousands of users in 15 states and 10 countries renting each other action sports equipment through Stokeshare.com. Next slide. So I don't want to spend too much time here, but just so you get a sense of how the platform works, this is our mascot, who we call the Rad Squatch. And if you're interested, you can follow him. He's got his own Instagram account. But taking you through the process, how it works is you sign up, you agree to be a trusted member of the Stokeshare tribe, then you can list your gear to make money, or you can go there to rent gear from other people. So you can meet a new friend, and then the idea is get outside and crush it and return the gear in perfect condition. Next slide. So my co-founder, Warren Nielsen, and I both come to this from sustainability backgrounds. We met as green building professionals in San Francisco and started surfing together at Ocean Beach. And the idea for Stokeshare really came because we talked a lot about other action sports we always wanted to try. We always wanted to spearfish and kite surf and whitewater kayak. Both of us were surfers and snowboarders, but there were these other really cool outdoor sports that could allow us to access very diverse parts of nature that are just difficult to get into. They're difficult to start. The problem is the expensive, complicated gear and really the know-how about how you start making sure you enter these sports in the right way. So next slide. So this is the solution. We started Stokeshare to solve this problem. And Stokeshare is here to help solve the part of the problem with the gear. So now access to the gear you need to get outdoors will never be a problem. And what's really cool about our platform is it's not just gear share. We don't call it gear share, we call it Stokeshare. And the idea is there's this social connection part of it that we really find is a powerful part of our marketplace. We like to use the term tribe, and I know it's used in a lot of business models these days, but for us, it's really ringing true because people who like the outdoors, if you're a hiker or a camper, you probably do one of these other sports like skiing or paddleboarding and vice versa. And those of us who love these sports and love the outdoors speak a certain language and have a certain respect for the places that we play in, the wild places we play in. And then that leads to us having a better sense of protecting them. And so this idea of getting a whitewater kayak from someone and then that person being able to tell us where to enter on the river, where's a safe place to exit the river, what are some maybe meetup groups we can get in touch with, what are some YouTube videos, and you're thinking about surfing or snowboarding, it's more about you get the gear and they can tell you their secret route to get to the mountain or the best time to go or the best time of year, or if you're surfing, the best place to get a fish taco after. So it's more than just gear share. It's this social connection of meeting someone, a like-minded individual who can help you fall in love with the sport that they're already very passionate about. Next slide. So SoCshare is a for-profit business model, but we are a mission-driven company modeled after leaders like Patagonia and Tom's. As I mentioned, Warren and I come from sustainability backgrounds. We wouldn't have started a company unless we knew it would have a positive impact on the world. Warren likes to say, actually, we are a mission with a company and not a company with a mission. And SoCshare addresses environmental issues in two very distinct ways. First, there's the inherent resource efficiency of the sharing economy. By sharing and reusing gear, we're reducing the burden on virgin resources and waste disposal in landfills. And as sustainability geeks, we're really fascinated by the life cycle impact our marketplace can provide and help solve. And then second, and this is what I really wanted to emphasize for the audience today, is our program to connect at-risk youth to nature through action sports. So we saw this opportunity to utilize the unused gear in our marketplace to help kids from disadvantaged communities experience the outdoors. And the program we launched has been incredibly successful thus far, and I'm excited to say more about it. Next slide. So for the resources side of it, like most of our consumer-driven economy, outdoor enthusiasts sometimes don't always realize the environmental footprint of the gear they use. And if you think about just the snowboard industry in general, last year 700,000 new snowboards were sold in America. So think about the wood, the metal, the plastic, the glue needed to make all those boards, and then all of the boards that were thrown away to make room for these new boards. It's an incredible environmental footprint. And if we can help provide more reuse of gear that's still in good shape and to circulate upcycled equipment into the economy and really facilitate this circular economy approach, we think we can really reduce this environmental impact of the gear. And I'm really interested to maybe to talk to someone like Chris at Protect Our Winters more about this organization called Sustainable Surf in the surfing industry, where I'm going to put a green building term in here. Green buildings are often certified as LEED certified buildings. And Sustainable Surf is a nonprofit that's kind of trying to do LEED certification for surfboards. So there's various strategies that you can implement in the construction of a surfboard that make it more sustainable than a baseline surfboard. And I think there's probably opportunities in all aspects of action sports equipment, including the ski and snowboard industry. And maybe there actually exists a system like this, but we think it's really cool that manufacturers are starting to think about the impact of the gear and not just about utilizing sustainable materials to make it, but to build it in a way that it can be deconstructed at the end of its life so that you can get reuse and recyclability out of those materials. And that's what Sustainable Surf's doing, and I think there's great opportunities in other industries too. Next slide. So for the youth program, this is the problem. Kids are spending less time outdoors. I'm sure a lot of us have seen slides or graphs like this, but the data is pretty clear. And we specifically are targeting the at-risk youth community, but this is a problem amongst young people of all socioeconomic backgrounds. And kids are getting outdoors less. They're spending more time on video games and their computers and their smartphones. And there's a variety of reasons for this, and one of them being is that the gear to get outdoors is often expensive. So next slide, looks like you jumped there already. And then kids are spending more time on their phones. They're spending more time within media. So we really want to hack this problem by using the same technology. Kids are spending 60% of the time on their phone. Well, what if we can put technology on their phone that inspires them to get outside and change this paradigm? Next slide. Really love this quote from Richard Louv, and I'm not sure if everyone's heard of him, but if you haven't, look him up. He's an author. He's famous for writing books called Last Child in the Woods and Vitamin N, and Vitamin N vitamin nature, but this quote of, if the disconnection between children and nature continues, who will become the future stewards of the earth? And I think that's not a trivial question. This is a really major problem that we need to focus on, and it's what Stokeshare is here to do. Next slide. So just showing here what we want to help the at-risk community specifically. There's 16 million children living below the poverty level. We want to give them a library card to outdoor sports. Next slide. People protect what they love what they know, and they know what they experience. Warren and I were fortunate enough to grow up in the outdoors, and we believe that's why we have this deep part of our body and part of our life that wants us to protect the environment. So our plan is to start by getting young people to fall in love with nature through action sports and help facilitate developing a larger group of the population in the future that will share this ethos. Next slide. We called our program, our at-risk youth program, One Watershed, and the idea is simple. We partner with youth development nonprofits. We crowdsource gear and volunteers from our existing Stokeshare users, and we host events where we introduce kids to surfing, paddleboarding, snowboarding, and other outdoor activities. So to date, we've done 8 events in California, in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego. We've impacted over 200 kids. We worked with 8 different youth nonprofits. We've worked with 4 different environmental conservation groups, and the event has been an incredible success, and it's attracted the attention of some really well-known brands like Patagonia and Borreo and Airbnb and Surfrider and Tom's, and we're really proud to continue working with new partners, and maybe Protect Our Winters can be a new partner. Next slide. We recently did our first snowboarding trip. We partnered with a nonprofit called Stoked Mentoring, a completely separate organization from us, but a very cool group here in Los Angeles, and it was amazing to see some of these kids from Los Angeles see snow for the first time and get to try snowboarding. Next slide. So why do we call it One Watershed? We came to this brand name because we love the idea of a watershed as a metaphor. As an environmental system, the watershed connects all aspects of Earth's geology. Changes upstream will impact systems downstream. As a surfrider, passionate member like myself, we clean the beach and we clean the coastline, but we know that that's not where a lot of the root of the problem resides. It's impacts that happen upstream in the watershed. So we like the idea of the metaphor for the same reason for the young people. If you think that everything you do has an impact downstream, we think showing young people that their community cares about them and that the mountains and the ocean are as much theirs as any other kids, this has the potential to have profound impacts on their future. Next slide. So I'll quickly go through a couple pictures from events, and as you can see here, what's amazing is, yeah, the girl there in the front, she's having an amazing time, and she's the one we wanted to introduce to surfing, but those 2 volunteers in the back are adults that we got to bring their surfboards down there for the day and help push kids into waves, and you can see this kind of event impacts the volunteer and the person with the gear as much as it does the kids. Next slide. This is a kid with the Los Angeles Police Department Cadet Program. He grew up 10 miles from the Pacific Ocean and had never seen it before until we hosted our event. And as you can see here, he was pretty stoked to be in the water. Next slide. We did a paddleboarding event in San Francisco with a nonprofit called Real Options for City Kids. The amazing community in the Bay Area came out with some of the best stand-up paddleboarding equipment you can find, and we were able to show these kids a different side of the San Francisco Bay than they're accustomed to. It was a beautiful, amazing day. Next slide. And here you can just see a common theme of our events is people are stoked, and we're introducing young people to the environment in an enjoyable way, and we think that will have a lasting impact. Next slide. And then we always follow up events with environmental education. So we partner with Surfrider when we do beach events. So we surf, and then we talk about the impacts that Surfrider is trying to solve. And this is the idea of experiential learning and environmental literacy. Next slide. We did this in San Francisco. We partnered with Save the Bay, and this woman came out from Save the Bay Foundation and talked about the threats of the San Francisco Bay and how this beautiful place the kids just paddleboarded in is under threat in a lot of ways, and we need young people like them to grow up and learn to help us solve these problems. Next slide. And it's working. These kids are really impacted by the environmental education after they experience nature through action sports. The kids that have done multiple events with us, especially through Surfrider, are becoming some of the biggest stewards of Surfrider. They're asking us to start Surfrider chapters after school in downtown Los Angeles. They want to know more about the plastic issue. They're telling their parents to make sure they vote for plastic bag bans. So we're seeing the model work, and it's really fun and exciting. Next slide. So we real quickly, I know I'm out of time, but we want to make sustainable culture of business model. We want to invest in the eco warriors of tomorrow, and those are going to be our customers too. So it makes a lot of sense from a business standpoint. Next slide. So I encourage everybody today, if you're interested in snowboarding and you have snowboards sitting around, your gear can transform a young person's life. If you list it on Stokeshare.com and you let us know that it can be available if we host an event near you for young people, the impacts of that gear are really amazing and profound. Next slide. So thank you. Please join us at Stokeshare.com. Follow us on social media. My contact information will be available. And thank you to the Green Sports Alliance and Protect Our Winters and Timberline. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks, Joel. Okay, so we are at the end of the hour, and usually wrap things up by now, but I know we started a little late. So if you'd like to stay on, we'll just do a quick Q&A. But I appreciate everyone's patience, and for those of you that are still on, please feel free to send us your questions, and we can address them if we get to it. We'll probably just keep this going for another 5 minutes or so. If that's okay with our speakers, I will just keep on going. So, one of the things that is really cool about snow sports in particular, and action sports in general, is their direct link to nature. And as Chris discussed, this is very much the climate change issues are very much impacting the integrity of the sport. And sports kind of cool that we can transcend beyond political, bipartisan issues. We, as sports, it's ubiquitous in communities. It's a symbol for bringing communities together. So I wanted to throw this out to all panelists. There's a lot of tension around climate change right now, but I wanted to talk to you just what the sport can do to move forward. What are the next steps in innovating and advancing this movement through snow sports? And if Chris, if you want to jump ahead, that'd be great.
Yeah, sorry. This is Chris. We are an advocacy organization, so I think that, we've got to get the snow sports community more involved in advocacy. We're at the point right now in the climate issue that, the hard work really needs to be done, and sustainability work is fantastic, but that's, there's also more work than that on top of it, and it's the hard work of getting really involved on an advocacy level, and that's really what our focus is. But I think the opportunity now is for people to focus on meaningful ways that they can mitigate climate change, and we believe that the next big step is to really get involved in the political process.
Great. Gina, any thoughts on what the next big step for Timberline is? Gina, you there? Okay, while we wait for Gina, what about you, Joel? Oh, okay.
I'm here. Sorry about that. I completely agree with Chris on the advocacy front, and we do some advocacy as a company through Timberline with our local and national lawmakers as far as climate policy and different bills that come up. For us at the resort level, the next step for where I would like to take this at Timberline is through guest education and reaching people one-on-one through different educational programs, different kind of poster programs and discussions that we have, forums that I would like to open up to make the whole mindset of sustainability and awareness of climate change more of the norm as far as the perception within the snow sports industry and the culture surrounding snow sports and the people that participate in not just snow sports but all action sports and all kind of individual pursuits that allow you to touch nature and experience nature. So really just raising awareness at the guest level and at the interaction level between guests and employees and guests and our company overall.
Joel, anything to add from your perspective, from the Stokeshire perspective?
Yeah, I mean, as you can tell from the theme of my presentation, I'm really interested in education. I think there's a lack of understanding about the issue of climate change generally. Even around this webinar and the lead up to it, with some of my social media posts that, hey, I'm going to be talking about climate change and snow sports with these really great people and these really great organizations, and you get some trolls out there online who want to say, well, it's dumping right now. How is there climate change? Or these ideas that because we're getting a lot of snow here in the West right now, that means that climate change isn't happening anymore. And there was a great article, I think it was in Powder magazine I saw yesterday, at powder.com, which was indicating that actually all this snow we're getting this winter is really dangerous and abnormal, and is actually a direct result of things that are happening with climate change. So I think, brands like Protect Our Winters, and something we're really trying to do with Stokeshire is teach sustainability and teach climate change in a cool way. I mean, we have cool brands, we have great content, our websites are interesting. I was on Protect Our Winters this week. I mean, it's amazing the content they have through some of their athletes. And how can we make sustainability cool? And how can we get in touch with people and talk to them in a very real and matter-of-fact way, that let's have an honest conversation about climate change and not make it a political issue. And it's something that we're all going to have to face and deal with. And there are major sectors of the economy, like the snow industry, that will be impacted if we don't act soon and act decisively. So I think continuing to incorporate education through action sports is a really big opportunity.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joel. And we definitely here at the Green Sports Alliance hear you on what you said in terms of, we're in an industry that's really fun, and we shouldn't take that for granted. And there's a lot that we can do through the power of sports of any kind. So thanks for that perspective from our three panelists. I have one question specific for Gina to support kind of the operators that have joined our webinar today. Who do you work with to implement the awesome programs that you outlined? Like who are the stakeholders you bring in from Timberline that have supported this work?
There's a number of stakeholders and partners that we work with on a regular basis. We work, like I said, we work with NSAA, National Ski Area Association. We also work with the State Historic Society. Friends of Timberline is a big one. That's a nonprofit that we work with frequently. Who else? We work with, another one that we work with on a regular basis is the Snowrider Foundation. We host cleanup days through them to come up and do garbage pickup and advocacy and education. We do a lot of this in-house, and so it's mostly through our staff and other departments. Yeah, that's kind of it.
Oh, great. Yeah, great. Thanks, Gina. Yeah, no, it's cool to see that beyond this internal staff, you're bringing in local community partners to support the work you're doing. So that's fantastic. And I'll just put out one last question since we're almost 10 minutes after. And thank you, everyone, for sticking around and staying engaged. Wanted to ask the three of you if you had any perspective on how to bring in businesses, the private sector, into the work that you're doing to advance this conversation.
We work with a lot of corporate partners in the outdoor sports industry, and I think we've just got to find a way to provide added value to them because they have really good sustainability teams. Some of them have some really good policy people on staff. So, I think, the angle and a lot of what we can bring to the team is that, this engagement idea that, like a lot of companies aren't necessarily engaging customers on this issue the way they could, or the way they could really have the power to do. And so, we love to talk to our companies about trying to figure out how they can use their brand and their reach to be a powerful force in convening the community on this issue.
Great. Joel, Gina, any thoughts?
Yeah, I can just add that.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry,
Go
Gina.
ahead.
I'll go quick. We've been a startup for the last 2 years, and that's had its advantages because we have focused really locally. Most of our team is in Los Angeles, and then we have my other co-founders in San Francisco. So we partnered locally with local groups and gotten on the ground and worked directly with our community and done events and have developed a little bit of a brand and a reputation that people in our community trust. And that has attracted the attention of larger brands, and specifically like Airbnb. Airbnb contacted us because their whole brand is about a global platform that allows everyone to be a local. And when they found out about some of the work we were doing from the social side, their corporate social responsibility team wanted to get involved. And there's a lot of big companies who want to have access and want to have real direct conversations with their customers at a local level. So I think my advice would be, and this is something that we want to, as we grow, continue to always have in our culture, is to stay local and stay at the grassroots level and know our community. And that will attract the attention of big brands because, the younger consumer really sometimes gets turned off by companies that are too big unless they can find a real tangible way to interact with them in their community.
Great. Gina, I know you were trying to chime in as well. Oh, Gina, I think you're muted. Hope we didn't lose. Oh, there we go.
I'm good. So with Timberline, like many ski areas, we're located in a small rural community. We're kind of an outlier as far as everything else that's going on in the county that we're situated in. And because of that, we are very connected with the people that live here. We provide employment for the vast amount of people that live in the towns closest to us, and engaging the people that live in those towns and work for us and the people that just live in those local communities to us is very important, and to maintain that relationship. And so moving forward, engaging in the community and engaging with nonprofits close to us is something that's very important as far as furthering our sustainability and environmental stewardship goals. We also are partnering with some of our corporate sponsors, some of the companies that we work with as far as equipment goes and other items that we have up here. We're working with them on doing things like reducing packaging and improving shipping so that we're not adding to the waste problem, and that we're really watching our footprint as far as what we're generating within our operations up here.
Awesome. Thanks, Gina, for sharing. Thank you all to our panelists. You guys did a great job. We're going to wrap things up now. Big thank you to our audience for staying engaged and bearing with us while we dealt with some technical difficulties and our tardiness. But this was an exciting presentation. There's a lot of innovation that can come through snow sports and action sports. And at the Green Sports Alliance, we're really looking forward to working with this industry to push the needle and expand the conversation of greening and sustainability in sports. Big thank you again to our panelists. Please don't forget that we have the webinar recording and the presentation deck available. Feel free to reach out to me at Dania, D-A-N-I-A, at greensportsalliance.org. There's a survey that will pop up after you go to webinar. Please, we'd love to hear your feedback and any ideas you have for future webinars. That said, I will let you all go and have a wonderful day. See you all next month. Take care.